Geoff Barton joins me, General Secretary of the Association of Schools and College Leaders. Good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Sheila.
How are you interpreting this?
Well, I've got slight reservations about it. I mean, first of all, I think, Sheila, it's great that we are talking about education. I mean, I was at the Conservative Party conference last year on a panel, and someone who had been involved in writing the last Conservative Party manifesto turned to me and she said, your job is to make education matter, because she says, frankly, it doesn't seem to. And I think a lot of your listeners will think that when we talk about, that the report that came out this week, the Public Accounts Committee, saying that young people have in the worst cases lost a decade of learning. My goodness, it does feel like education has been left on the margins. So my first point, it's great that Labour are talking about education. I just wonder, though, if there isn't a bit of stereotyping going on here. The assumption that middle-class parents at the moment aren't sending their children to state schools. I was a state school head. My kids went there. All of my friends.
The vast majority are, aren't they? The vast majority. They are.
And, if you had Nick Gibb or you had the Secretary of State on, they would say 80% of schools in England are good or outstanding schools. And so the stereotype that actually this is about middle classes choosing because they've got aspirations to send their children to independent schools, I think is a bit of a slur on lots of working class people who also have got aspirations for their parents. And as somebody who was proudly the head of a comprehensive school, I was delighted that we had debating and we had the arts and sport because we wanted to provide the kind of education at a cost that you would get by paying fees to go to local independent schools. So you can see I've got a reservation if what this is going to do is to simply play into some stereotypes. But my final point, before I shut up for you, is to say...
I don't want you to.
The one thing that Bridget Phillipson didn't say was, if you're a parent who decides to send your child to an independent school, my guess is there's a couple of reasons for that. You want what happens in the classroom, the quality of education in the classroom, and you want the stuff that happens outside the classroom. That's where the extracurricular stuff in the arts and sport and debating happens. But I think there's a second reason. You want smaller class sizes. Now, if Labour's going to commit that actually every child from every background, particularly disadvantaged, are going to be in smaller class sizes, that would be a very, very significant moment when everybody would say, I'd like to have some of that as well. And I noticed that was conspicuous by its absence in what she was saying earlier on today.
Nothing explicit about class sizes, and that's what you'd like to hear?
I think so, because, I mean, it's interesting when we have discussions about this. People will sometimes get research out and say, well, if you look at one of the top performing places in the world, Shanghai, and I know schools in Shanghai very well because we had a partnership with them, they will have class sizes of 40 or 50. And so you'll quickly get people saying, well, class size doesn't make a difference. But common sense tells us that particularly in a week when we are seeing eye-watering problems of recruitment and retention, that it must be the case that if you're a teacher who is preparing 5 lessons on this Friday and each of those classes has got 30 children in it instead of 20 or 15, that is bound to create more workload for you and helps to explain why we lose a third of teachers after 5 years because they leave because of the workload.
Which age group are you talking about when you talk about class sizes of 30 or 15? Because when I was at school, in senior school, from 11 to 16, because obviously A-level classes were smaller, but from 11 to 16, 30 was typical.
Yeah, so what we've got at the moment across primary is class sizes are supposedly not going to be larger than 30, but we will have a lot of primary schools where class sizes are around 30. And that will be the case largely in secondary until what happens at the age of 14, as you'll know, is young people start to choose their options. And so whilst they can't choose not to do maths and not to do English, they might choose to do, let's say, GCSE music if the school offers that. Now, by definition, there will be fewer young people who choose to do music than choose to do certain history, let's say.
For example, yeah.
And therefore you will find smaller class sizes in some of those option subjects, including at A-level. But I think, in a sense, we've got that the wrong way round, because wouldn't it be better to argue that younger children, where we're building the foundations of their learning,
need closer attention?
Yeah, would be the ones who would benefit the most from actually having more attention from a teacher and teaching assistants, who I think are the great unsung heroes of our school system. They
certainly are. I know, I mean, again, thinking back to my own time, in primary we did not have, so under the age of 11 we did not have 30, definitely not. And very small in infant school, before you went to junior school, really small, probably 15 maximum. So that's changed, has it, over the years? That's become a primary school could be as many as 30.
They could be, and the government will be furious at me raising this, but the reality is that funding has been a problem in our schools. Okay, now if you haven't got sufficient funding in your schools, there are only two things you can do. You can make class sizes bigger so that you are proportionately employing fewer teachers in a kind of efficiency model, if you see what I mean. And secondly, you can cut certain courses. So when I mentioned GCSE music and A-level music, A-level German, those courses are expensive to provide because they have smaller class sizes. I've had an email from a head teacher today saying we're scrapping GCSE music. We can't afford to run it anymore.
Terrible.
So you can see that helps to explain why class sizes are not as low as they might have been in your day and my day. And one of the things that the government would say in response, if they were here, is they've put more funding into education, and by 2025, funding in this country will be back to where it was in 2010. Is that really such a proud boast? That we're looking back 15 years and saying that it's taken 15 years to get back to where we were. And, I was ahead during that period. And yes, the funding was better, but we also had mental health support. We had police who were able to come and do prevention work in the school. We had better range of other staff to be able to do things because we could afford it. And that's why I think that funding will be at the heart of a lot of this, and will explain why class sizes are larger, and that why a brave Labour Party would start to give the commitment, if they really want to have as a benchmark independent schools, well, let's give smaller class sizes as well as all of that extracurricular stuff, which we all know is really important. And
a word on that extracurricular stuff. I mean, some of it is in the curriculum, isn't it? I mean, music is in the curriculum, for example. But that wider stuff of arts and drama, sports, debating, school clubs that can be incredibly educational as well, but also therapeutic and fun and social and all of those so-called soft skills that aren't soft at all. Is that on the wane in state education, would you say?
Well, once again, it's just harder to sustain it because the way in which you're able to provide your extracurricular music or the debating society that I used to run is because the people who are teaching music and teaching English during the day are then giving up their lunchtimes and staying on after school. If the workload for teachers gets more and more, they're less likely to be able to do all of that kind of thing. And I think that's one of the frustrations, that those things which we know are so important in social skills and building character, the kind of things which you would want your child to be able to experience, they are becoming much more difficult to be able to sustain because they have a cost to them. Now, if Labour's giving a commitment to the broad and balanced curriculum with all-rounded extracurricular activities, we would welcome that. But let's see, how are we going to make that happen? Because there will be a cost to that. And part of the cost, I think, is to make that happen in the most disadvantaged areas. And at the moment, if I'm looking for a headship, or if I'm looking to become a teacher, and I go to one of the most disadvantaged schools, I know that if we have a bad Ofsted inspection or the league tables turn against us or whatever, then the chances are my school will be taken over. And the chances are, as a trade union leader, that we will be there trying to defend someone from losing their job.
And just, again, sorry to ask you just another word before you go. If Labour gets into power, I'm going to be asking callers now what they want from Labour when it comes to their child's state education. If Labour gets into power, those more deprived areas, because we do see the difference in outcomes, don't we, in educational outcomes in some deprived areas versus others.
We do.
What would make an ambitious teacher go to one of those places?
Well, if it was Labour looking at the policy on that, what I would be doing is taking my Shanghai example, right, where the maximum teaching a teacher does in Shanghai is 50% of the timetable. And what that means is that whereas at the moment what teachers will do is they will have meetings after school and training after school at the end of term, it is built into the school day. Your professional development is built in. And what I would be saying to Labour is, why didn't you just try in the most challenging areas of saying the maximum you will teach as a new maths teacher, a new history teacher, is 50%, and your professional development.
By that you mean 50% of your working week will be teaching?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. 50% of the week will be teaching. You'll have time to do your marking and assessment, but you'll have someone coaching you and mentoring you during the school day to help you to become a better teacher. And if we could do that and take away some of that pressure of accountability, so you don't, as a new head, think, if a school requires improvement and gets a second requires improvement, it is automatically now going to be taken over by an academy chain. Well, why would I be incentivized to go and work in that school?
Yeah.
Let's change the accountability so it's less punitive, because frankly, Sheila, we need our best teachers and best leaders to go to the communities that need them most.
Okay.
And at the moment, the system works against that.
Thanks very much, Geoff. Good to talk to you. Geoff Barton, General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders.